drive. Whenever I hear something interesting that I think people would like to know about, I like to kind of record it. And we were just in Sing Sing, and I'm in the car right now at Debar, or we were just going by Sing Sing, the prison. And I know that there's some history there, and in terms of why they built it, why it sits on the water. And Don was telling us some very interesting history that I thought you guys might find interesting as well. And Don Debar has been an activist for a long time. He's affiliated with WBAI and the Pacifica Network, and he also does CPR Metro, the radio station, him and Bernard White, and he does international programs as well. So Don, what were you telling us about Sing Sing?
Sing Sing was actually built in the early to mid 19th century here in Austin, New York, and actually it took its name from the area. It was originally called, this village was originally called Sing Sing. It was named after the indigenous people that lived here who called themselves Sin Sink, or Stone Upon Stone. The prison was one of the early what they called reformatories. It was a place where people were sent after being convicted, with the philosophy being that they would be retrained and reformed and set back into civilization, quote unquote, and with a new perspective and better able to contribute to society. It was part of the prison reform movement of the day. Part of that process involved, like much of the rest of the economy, involuntary servitude. The labor of the prisoners was taken, appropriated, converted to private use after it was conducted by manufacturing, for example, was conducted by the prison itself and by the state. The fact that there was a movement against that, against this essentially slave labor by prisoners, resulted in the village changing its name from Sing Sing to Ossining, which was just a variation of that name, so that manufacturing products that came out of Ossining would no longer be associated with the prison, which had people protesting, boycotting goods at that point in time. This was at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. The electric chair was in Sing Sing almost from its creation during the late 19th century. There were 600 or 700 people executed here in Ossining, including the Rosenbergs, most famously in the early 1950s. The prison is still a functioning prison. There have been attempts to close it by various real estate interests who would like to build condominiums on the site. There's almost 100 acres of waterfront property there. People who were opposed to the mass incarceration state, although given the fact that there are going to be thousands of people imprisoned that live in New York City metropolitan area until there's a revolution, it is one of the closest to New York, and so probably the one that should be the last closed, so the families don't have to drive to the Canadian border or upstate New York to visit their families. The lawyers don't have to travel that far. And all of that has resulted in it still being a working prison. It's known as the Oscar Correctional Facility now, so the names came full circle.
Let me just ask you one other question, because I was noticing that Sing Sing sits upon a river, and you were saying that that's where they got the saying, you're going to be sent up the river.
That's right. Sing Sing was made famous by some of the gangster movies in the early 1930s and later. The crime dramas that were typical of that period, a lot of it propaganda for the FBI and the New York State Police and NYPD. The Prohibition period, when they had the rise of gangsterism, saw a lot of people from New York City being sent up there, and they referred to being sent to Sing Sing as being sent up the river. They also referred to it as the Big House. Those terms applied to Sing Sing.
Just one other thing I just would like for you to comment, because you mentioned the Rosenbergs, and there are some people who might not be that familiar with the Rosenbergs, so could you just give a little bit could you tell us a little bit of something about who the Rosenbergs were?
Ethel and Julius Rosenberg were members of the Communist Party, and in the McCarthy period, really the Truman period is a more accurate way of putting it, the during the Cold War that began under President Harry Truman. There were political attacks on people where they were looking at communists under just about every rock. The big fear was of communist spies, and after the Soviet Union blew up its first atomic weapon in 1948, I think it was, since the United States had been the first to discover the atomic bomb, the assumption was, in any event, the propaganda point was that somehow the Soviets had stolen the secret that belonged to the United States of the atomic bomb. And that political point was used in the presidential election in 1948 and again in 1952, and in the congressional election intervening in 1950. There were...
Hold on, I just see where Serene tried to call, so we better get this call. But thank you so much. Thank you.